Some of the most powerful coaching I know stops at insight. Some approaches even consider that the whole point, almost like a miracle of sorts. The world looks one way and then something in your perspective shifts like a prism and everything looks different. And I agree. Insight is powerful. But it's not the whole story. And if that's where your transformation is leaving you, one insight after another, you're not evolving, you're addicted. Your system has become incredibly efficient at generating the feeling of progress without requiring any real change. Real change should not be imaginary. It's demonstrable. It's visible to you, to others. And if you've already spent time in the transformational space, then you already know what I'm talking about because you've had these moments. You read something, you hear something, or you have a conversation that just it pierces straight through the noise and suddenly you can see clearly. You understand what's been holding you back. You can articulate it. It's like this aha that lands like liberation. And it makes this shift in your body as if something has already begun. Now, in that moment, it feels real. It is real. Think of it like a spark with a match. It feels like movement and it feels like you've crossed into something new, but then you don't. And the match goes out and you crave another. The question is why that moment, which felt so real, had actually very little impact in how you operate once you return to your life. Here's why. Your brain does not primarily reward you for completing something. It rewards you for anticipating it as if it were done. So the moment that you decide you're going to change, the moment you map out the plan, the moment you begin to imagine the future version of yourself, your system can feel it and it begins to respond as if something meaningful is already underway. If you are into the manifestation realm, this is what you're taught in manifesting. You feel the energy, you feel clarity, you feel motion, and all of that arrives before a single behavior has actually been altered. So now, if that's where you land, you have a problem that's very easy to miss because you can create the internal experience of progress and transformation without producing any external evidence of it. And some people stay here for years. So you can feel like someone who's moving while remaining exactly where you are. If that loop repeats enough times, it'll become your default pattern. You'll begin to orient toward the anticipation of change instead of the execution of it. And because you're thoughtful and you're self-aware, you'll get very good at refining that anticipation, of justifying it. You'll understand and you'll analyze, you'll develop increasingly sophisticated explanations for why that past thing, maybe that past insight didn't work, but now this is the thing. Now this is the thing and why things are. And all of that reasoning is going to make it feel like you're getting closer to the thing. But what you're actually doing is you're reinforcing the same neurological pathway again and again of almost, not yet. You're training your system to associate insight with progress. And over time, that becomes indistinguishable from real movement. Now, underneath all of that is something even more stubborn, and that is identity. The version of you that shows up in your life is not determined by what you understand or what you intend to do. Intent is not impact. So your identity is determined by what your nervous system has learned to repeat in familiar conditions. By the way, these have been distilled down into 4 distinct patterns over collectively 40 years of work between myself and my partner in crime and co-founder, Tom Fazio. You can pause this video, you can go down into our description, take the Somatic Skins Quiz. It'll give you these nervous system breakdown patterns. So good. Okay. Back to this. So you can understand your nervous system and you can have a moment where you see yourself differently, where you feel a different standard, where you operate briefly in a way that surprises you. And then you'll go back into the same environment that initially shaped you, the conditioned self, or as we call it, the conditioned skin. And the system will again begin to stabilize around what it already knows. Same spaces, same rhythms, same relational dynamics, and the same cues that have been reinforcing your behavior, maybe for years, pulling you back into alignment with who you have been. And that is not because you lack desire or sincerity. It's because nothing in your system has been trained to really hold anything else. So the match of insight sparks, and because it's not supported by fuel, by a candle or whatever you want to use, goes out. And insight fades because it was real, but it wasn't installed. Now, there's this moment that matters a great deal once insight sparks, and it's called the threshold. The point where you are close enough to the shift to act that it means that something real would have to change. That's the threshold, right? And that's where most people will delay. And the delay always sounds reasonable. There's always something to finish first, something to get back to, something to organize, something to prepare, some version of like, I really want to make the most of this and this would be better if, and it makes the hesitation feel justified. But every time you approach that edge and then you step back, your system records that pattern of threshold and back. You see? And it learns that proximity doesn't lead to action. It learns that for you, you don't cross. And over time, the anticipation becomes the destination. You want the hit, you want the feel, because it's the only part of the loop that consistently delivers a feel-good reward. So now you have somebody who is intelligent, who's capable, who's self-aware, and is repeatedly walking up to the line and walking back. And from the outside, it looks like engagement, it looks like participation, but from the inside, it looks like almost being there, like almost there for longer than maybe you'll care to admit. If something is actually going to change, this pattern has to be identified in a way that your system cannot simply think its way around. It has to happen in conditions where your usual responses are no longer sufficient. It ain't gonna work. Where the way you typically orient around yourself and who you are, it stops functioning well. And something new has to organize in its place. That doesn't happen through more information, sorry to tell you, because information operates at the level of understanding. So it's more head when head's been what's getting you into trouble. Change operates at the level of experience, repeated under pressure. So it's insight, choice, action. Memorize that. Insight, choice, action. And the action has to be definitive and non-reversible. When you step into an environment designed to support you with insight, choice, and action, where you're not just observing and analyzing, but you're actively participating in conditions that require a different response from you, something begins to shift in a way that's really, really difficult to manufacture on your own. That is when it's followed by repetition, by structure, and by continued exposure to those up-leveled conditions, so that the new behaviors, your new identity, is not a one-time event, but something that your system begins to expect. Then your identity starts to update. That's not an idea. It sets a new baseline. That distinction between insight and installation. Insight to installation is exactly what most people, maybe you, have been missing. And it's why most traditional approaches in coaching and development, they stop short of where you actually need them to go. Because if you have invested and shown up to build all of the bridge of your skills, your strategy, your expertise, your insight, your self-awareness, like truly incredible human, right? But you can't lock in the last two bricks of the bridge. The bridge is not a bridge, it's useless. The prestige, our work was built for the people who are done stopping short of the full bridge. So the prestige, if you haven't heard of us before, it's our Applied Somatics Academy. Fancy words, which essentially means that we're not working at the level of ideas. We're looking at the level of your embodied identity held within your innerved system, your nervous system. We create the conditions where your system actually changes, where you experience yourself differently in real time. And then you learn how to carry that part of you, those new parts, back into your life where it matters most. We host monthly events, think of them as somatic simulations, that place you directly inside conditions that challenge you. Feels like play, works like simulation, where something in you has to respond and reorganize. Then we'll take that shift and we'll bring it into our coaching circles and take what happens in the events and we translate it into your decisions, your training, your relationships, your work, your health, whatever is meaningful for you in living a bigger life. And in this way, it becomes something that you can actually live. It's yours to keep forever. If you have been someone who understands what to do, who has seen clearly what needs to change and has felt that gap between knowing and becoming, and you've seen through the facade of more insight hits, like I said, like a drug, then you're standing at the edge of this conversation and you have a choice about what you want to do with it. At some point, it stops being about finding the right idea and it becomes about stepping into the right conditions. That's why I'm here. We're opening the next season of The Prestige now. Come experience this work directly. See what changes when you stop walking up to the threshold and stepping back and you start crossing the line. You start engaging, you start participating in a way that your system can't ignore. If that resonates, reach out, start the conversation, and we'll take it from there.